Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. Forest. I'm coming to you still down from southern Utah, and I'm here working with the New Earth Foundation. They've got a program called Beyond Boundaries where they bring in a bunch of youth from inner city LA, mostly LA County, and brought them up here to southern Utah to have amazing experiences, expand minds, hearts, and consciousness. I got to do a ceremony concert with them on Friday night. More about that soon. But first, I want to say, this week I have a conversation with Tiffany Shlain. Tiffany was on the podcast before. She is a documentary filmmaker, an artist, and just all around super interesting woman. And we loved what we got into last time. We're like, oh, let's pick this up and do this again. So that's exactly what we did. We wanted to focus the conversation a little bit more around creativity, but we always just let it flow where it wants to flow. And this was another good one. So I know you're really going to enjoy this. But going back to this week, I'm actually still in the middle of the retreat. I need to go back. I just wanted to come home for a minute to take care of a little business, get this podcast out to y'all. But we did a concert on Friday night, and it was just beautiful to watch. Like, you know, I got to the second song, and I was playing some parts of Dark Thoughts, the Ram Dass song. And it's just wild to watch, like, Ram Dass's words go through the room, and there's kids ages like 14 to, 22, 23, a couple, and they've definitely never heard of Ram Dass before. And watching the universal wisdom that he's saying resonate with them too, and for some of them really crack them wide open, and having these really large cathartic emotional releases that was profound to witness, because I don't think for some of them they've had space ever maybe to let some of that stuff out. And it's a kind of like grief in a way that is blockaded in over time. And I think a lot of us know, when grief is not allowed to flow, it's like a dam that's holding water back, and it can find outlets in other ways that maybe aren't the most healthy, and can manifest all sorts of, physical or emotional problems. Just imagine what that's like if perhaps for you, if it was your whole life and these things are building up, traumas after traumas and hardships after hardships. I'm hearing stories that are truly breaking my heart, and it really makes me just a level of compassion that it makes me feel quite full, but full in a way that it's a lot to hold. Hearing some of these stories, just how some of the things they've gone through, it's really hard. But I'm just presenting that music and showing up as a witness, just to be present and loving, and that's what I have to offer. And it was beautiful to see that, just like the broad human elements of just music in general, and what it can do for us. And then again, seeing little bits of Ram Dass in there and other songs I was playing, just seeing them walk through it just like we do at any of these other events or concerts. It was amazing. I did get some footage of some of it. I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast, but I'm working on a documentary with some great filmmakers, and we're gathering up, hopefully, the last remaining amount of funding. So if anyone out there wants to support the documentary, please reach out. I can give you a lot more information. We made a little trailer to show people. It's actually, the trailer is like on my website. It's sort of my about video, but that's our initial trailer. And it's all about transformation and music and normalizing transformation, and what role does music and ceremony play in that, particularly with an angle on psychedelic therapy. But like on Friday, there are no psychedelics involved, of course. It's just the music, and it's a human thing to go into these spaces and to open up. And so, anyway, we got some footage of that, and it's just, I feel honored to be a part of it. And just huge shout out to New Earth. This is their Beyond Boundaries program, but the New Earth Foundation, Harry Grammer, who's been on the podcast. If you haven't heard Harry Grammer's episode here, go back and hear it, because he's a great storyteller, but he's also just like, I'm in total awe of this man and his endless compassion and the work that he's doing. So more on that after it finishes. Maybe I'll have some more stories for you. There's lots of fun things and interesting things that have happened. But this coming weekend, I will be heading out to Southern California to be part, I think it's called Mycologia, but it's Doubleblind is doing a little festival that I'm playing a ceremony concert at this weekend. And then the following weekend, we'll be at Esalen doing a retreat that is sold out, but I believe there'll be another one in December. And then I'm playing at the Arkadia, Aubrey Marcus's festival in mid-July. That might be moving locations, so I don't want to say where because I don't know if I don't know if they've nailed officially down where, but it's still happening as far as I know, and looking forward to that. And then I'll be in North Carolina in late August for the Ramdas retreat happening in the mountains, the sacred Blue Ridge Mountains. We'll be in Boone, North Carolina at the end of August. And we'll also be announcing some dates in Europe soon for November, and probably announcing some dates for sure in the fall for the United States. Maybe even a couple Canada. We'll see. I know it's been a while. COVID, you heard of it? It screwed things up. But yes, and then one more piece of housekeeping. At the end of this month, on June 30th, I'm going to be doing a live stream. Well, we call it the Council Gathering. It's on my Patreon, and that's a way to support this whole project. But to support this podcast is on patreon.com/eastforest. But one of the things we do there for certain tiers is a monthly gathering where we sort of witness one another and connect, and then I do a live music meditation. But this month, it's open to everybody. So any tier, even the $4 tier, if you sign up before the 30th, you can join us for that live stream. And I want to thank Chuck and Kamal and Kathleen and Julian for signing up recently. It's going to be a good one. And everyone who's on our council on the Patreon, thank you for supporting this podcast. Thank you for supporting the East Forest Project. It means a lot to me. You can always say hello at info@eastforest.org or on the socials, East Forest on Instagram and East Forest Music on all the others. Okay, we're going to get into this because this is a good one. Let's dive into this conversation with our old friend, Tiffany Shlain. You have a different hat this time. So.
I have many hats. I have many. Yeah. If you went to saw my closet, I have many hats.
Well, you wear many hats. That's actually right.
That's a good segue. Yeah, I know. It is. That's a good segue. Yeah. Yes.
So speaking of wearing many hats, what can you give us a little update, like what's on the forefront for you? We probably spoke about, I'm guessing it was a year ago, but I don't really know.
You know, a lot has happened. Okay. Yeah. I might have mentioned this in our conversation, but I've been a filmmaker for 25 years. Yep. And but then during COVID, I started spending a lot of time on Mount Tam, which is right near where I live with my dog, and started making art, trying to articulate this sense of time and space I felt like COVID distorted and stretched and reconfigured. And so I started making sculptures and photography in this experimental film. And we've had people over for Shabbat every Friday night, as you know, because we turn off the screens every Friday and we have Shabbat. And people kept seeing the art. And long story short, from that, I got invited to do an artist in residency in the city. And I am now in this beautiful art space on the top of the San Francisco Ferry Building. And I'm having an art show in October. So it's this very exciting creative journey that is very unexpected and wonderful and exciting because it feels, everything feels very new and fresh and like I'm on a creative adventure. So there's kind of that component. And then the other exciting thing that's happening is that I was invited to go to Rio in Brazil, which I've never been to. So I'm going next month. And I'm going to perform a show I did at the Museum of Modern Art in New York right before the pandemic. I only had one performance of it called Dear Human. And it's something I call spoken cinema. And I had one premiere. It was like a highlight of my life. And then the world shut down. So I am now doing my second version of the show in Rio in July, which is exciting.
Well, that'll be a blast going
Yeah.
all the way to Brazil.
I know. Have you ever been?
Amazing. No, I'm like I had to think about it. No, I haven't been to
I
Brazil.
want to go to Brazil. I'm so excited.
Wow. So, and the art that you're doing in the ferry building, is this visual art or what is
Yeah,
that?
it's sculptures and big scale sculptures and then miniature sculptures. And then this experimental art film. I'm having so much fun thinking about, making a film that doesn't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. And it's more experiential, which I know a lot of your work is about. But I'm curious if you think of, you probably do think of your shows in a narrative, or do you think about them in a beginning, middle, and end?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. And not to be this guy, but that mic is very sensitive. And so you're probably gonna have
Oh,
to hold it. Yeah. Or put your hair on the other side. Or put the mic on the other
that's a
side.
good idea.
Either or.
Um,
Um,
okay. Is that better?
there you go. We'll see. Yeah.
Okay, that is better. Yeah, because my hair.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's yeah, those things are really
That's
sensitive, which is
amazing.
good
I'm
and
gonna
bad,
hold
I
it too.
guess.
I'll hold it up here.
Okay. It's funny because I like bending the rules or the expectations about beginning, middles, and ends and this sort of thing. But at the same time, we know that these kinds of structures are really helpful. Like there's expectations for us about what stories are. And even in songs, like
Mm-hmm.
we're used to certain kind of structure that kind of has, in a way, that Aristotelian idea of like beginning, middles, and ends.
Mm,
But when you play with it, that's when things get really fun.
right.
And I've been thinking lately that this ceremony concert model that I've been doing would be stronger if it had narrative. And I don't
Mm.
really know exactly how that would look. But maybe it's just because I used to be in the theater, or I just know how difficult it is too to like do narrative well or bring in those elements. So I know it's not just an easy thing, but I think it would make it like almost more like a one man show, to be honest, where it's just more than just music.
Yeah, it's
It's
got a
got
structure.
s-
It's got like a
yeah,
an
bits of
armature.
story or yeah, there's something else. There's just another layer in there in a sense that could be experimental in itself.
Well, that's the thing because I started in experimental film. Actually, when I was at UC Berkeley, I really started, they didn't have any film production there. And so I would make films by editing together old movies. And it was that amazing creative constraint of like, it wasn't like it was UCLA or NYU, but that um, experimenting within the form. I mean, I think that's a very exciting edge to dance on is to know the structure of beginning, middle, and end. And actually, in documentary, it's fascinating. I worked with this story editor on my feature Connected, and she had studied 70 of the top documentaries and mathematically showed, no, this blew my mind, that the most popular beloved documentaries, they're like second act climax, which means the most prominent thing that happens in the movie. The movie then had to end within 10 minutes, or it was like mathematical compared to
Wow.
the length of the film. That when you feel like a film goes on too long, it's when this big moment happened and it didn't wrap up after that. You didn't get like the third act, which is like concludes things, took too long. And she literally did mathematics to it. And it blew my mind. And then once I knew that, when I would go see films, maybe I thought about that too much for a while, but I do find it very exciting to break the form too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of another element of.
Wow. Did that story editor, did she do that to an edit or just to the script on paper?
She was doing it to kind of help filmmakers, and she really helped me understand where my peaks and valleys were emotionally, and
Mm-hmm.
when I had to deliver the conclusion. It's really
Wow.
she's her name's Karen Everett, and
I'm gonna write that
yeah,
down.
she teaches at UC Berkeley. I think she still teaches the journalism documentary. She's wonderful, and now after I worked with her on that film, I've worked with her on almost every other film in some capacity because I love bringing in minds I respect that have all of their different experience to, like, there's nothing more intimate and beautiful to me than like to share a script or a cut or, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure you felt that way. I love that trailer you sent me. And just, I'm sure you, when,
We're making it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why I want her name, because I'm like, that
Oh,
stuff's so
I'm
important.
happy to introduce you. She helped me so much. And I'm happy to introduce you. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, well, you're totally right. It's very tender sharing work. I mean, people have to be careful who you ask opinions from
Well,
because,
yes.
if you really think about it, do you want any old opinion? No.
Well, but I think also the way you ask for feedback, I made a whole film. It's just a 5-minute film called The Creative Process, but I have learned that, like, I've been in a lot of film groups. Like, I'm currently in a woman film director group. We meet once a month. It's wonderful. But I've been in different groups in my career. And one time I was in this, sorry, I'm just giving my dog a bone so she won't make noise. There we go. I was in a film director group, and there was someone in there who I really respected. And I sent him a rough cut of my film. I'm like, would love feedback. And he gave the most intense cutting feedback. And I
Wow.
was so crushed. And afterwards, like, it took me courage to like write back to him and be like, was there anything that you liked about it? And he was like, oh yeah, of course. I liked this, this, and this. And I realized you have to hold people's hands on how to give feedback, that we're
Yeah.
vulnerable human beings and we share something,
Yep.
a labor of love. You have to. So now what I do, and I kind of gave it a name and made a film about it. And it's very known at my film studio as the love sandwich. So when you give someone a cut of your film or a draft of your book or a draft of your music, whatever, you can say, I'd love to share this with you. Would love to hear what works for you. Then I would love to hear what you think I need to work on. And then again, what was your overall thing that you loved? And I'm telling
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Right.
it makes such a difference in just, we're all human, and you need to learn how to ask for feedback properly. And so a lot of times when I do a lot of rough cut screenings on bigger projects, and I will give them like a questionnaire, and it's in that order. Something
I
positive.
love that. I love that. What God, this just came up for me this morning. I mean, this sort of circles back to what we were talking about before, and this relates to now. Just to frame this conversation, we had said we wanted to talk about
Creativity.
right, and we
We
are,
are, we are, we are.
and I mean, I don't really have any rules about it, but um, speaking of creativity, like we were talking about social media, and like just this morning, so I've been working on a new album, and I was just in this very tender space where I've been writing these songs that have singing on them, and without a lot of backstory, it was very vulnerable for me. I'm feeling like, man, I'm really feeling like I'm putting myself out here. These are like songs. Are these any good? That kind of thing. And
Yeah.
my partner Rada is like my go-to. Like, hey, I want you to hear this,
Yeah.
and see your response. And she's great. But I asked her, and this is how insidious these comments can be. I think I had one comment that I saw on social media from my last record over a year ago, where someone's like, "Well, I don't really like your chest voice. I'd rather hear you sing like a falsetto, like you normally do." Just one person. Just one person.
And that's what you
And it's
focus
just,
on.
and here I
Yeah.
am recording vocals, like sitting here in the studio, and I'm thinking that about that one person. And then I tell her, it's like, I don't know. I mean, maybe nobody wants to hear my chest voice. And that's how careful I think sometimes
Yeah.
that tender space is
Yeah.
of creation. And I don't know really what to do with that, because I do want people's opinions, but it can be a poison.
Yeah, I think well, first of all, I want to hear your chest voice. Secondly, I don't even know really what that means, but it sounds great. But I think that's right. That, I mean, my dad, who is an amazing writer, one comment he would fixate. And I think I have one friend who doesn't read reviews of her books. She's like, I just can't do it.
Yeah, I feel that.
I do read my reviews. I have learned, obviously the great ones feel great. And sometimes the critical ones, actually, they have some truth in there that I've thought about on my next project. As painful, like, to me, it's information. And again, I think going back to, I mean, I love making, people are posting all the time about my book. Like just today, someone tweeted this wonderful thing about 24/6. It just made me so happy. And, sometimes I'm sure if you see something snarky, you're going to think about that. But I think I think you have to look at it in concentrics, like in circles around you. And actually, a lot of my new art, I'm dealing with a lot of circles. So I love thinking about this. Like you have your core people, like your partner you're going to go
Yeah.
to, right? And then there's a
Yeah.
core people that you really respect that you're inviting in to give you feedback. And that's a very select, beautiful group that you respect what they create. Because a lot of people can critique that never create. And like, are you really going,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So, and then when you go to the public and on social media, you're going really wide. And there's also but there's also a beautiful to getting like when I release a film online, there's like a great response. And I mean, I remember YouTube, this is a long time ago when they were actually featuring films. They had something called like, what was it called? There's something like the red curtain. And it was this was like 15 years ago where they would pick a film each day. And there was a film of mine about American Jewish identity told through the Barbie doll. And it was this very kind of edgy film I made. My first kind of big film after I sold the Webby Awards. And she said to me, I just want to prepare you because on YouTube, you're going to get a lot of anti-Semitic comments. And I'm just going to prepare you.
God.
And I was like, I'm cool with that. I've got a thick skin to that, and oh my God, so this film goes out there and it was so intense. There was lots of great comments and then the anti-Semitism in there. And, we're human. I mean,
No doubt. But the people making those comments, it is the least, it's the lowest denominator of our humanity. It's like the anonymity
right, the anonymous
and the
aspect.
trolling.
Yeah.
Yeah, like YouTube is really, that is the bottom of the
That
barrel.
is. And
YouTube
actually
comments.
now
I will never read a YouTube
I
comment
actually,
again.
on some films, I don't even have it on anymore because I just didn't
That's
find
great.
it was valuable. Like I just was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And actually it's interesting on Vimeo. So I don't know if you've found this. So I don't really push those channels a lot, but Vimeo, you can turn off comments, turn off views, because that's another interesting thing. Like this one series that I did called The Future Starts Here. And we did 2 seasons and it did very well. It got nominated for an Emmy, had 40 million views. Now,
Wow.
on their platform, when it was reposted to YouTube, none of that information was there. And I was frustrated that none of its like energy that when it first came out, when it was on this different planet, it wasn't documented in any way. And I always felt like, I hate that wasn't transferable in some way. And that's a whole other thing about kind of energy around a song or a film or a book. And when it, I mean, that's kind of a different part of the conversation, which it actually isn't.
Well, is and isn't, though. The economy of scale, and how that lives as like an engine of creativity. And these days, if we're really honest with ourselves, how much of a motivation that is, yet at the same time, you're chasing your own tail in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a people, we've really gone headfirst into this in the last 10 years of it's a numbers game. Everything's data. Everything's numbers. But that's its worth. And
I hate that.
That can change how you make things or how you distribute things. And I think it's, I don't know. I mean, you could say it makes better art because people are really focused on like that litmus test of what's really working with a lot of people. But then, of course, you could argue you're not taking as many risks because you want to hit the most.
Right. And is the most, I mean, this is back to that circle of people that you really admire and respect to give feedback versus, I mean, I do like creating for mass. I do. I'll tell you why. I don't know if you feel this way with music, but I make a lot of films about pretty polarizing subjects like reproductive choice or whatever. And it's not like I feel like I'm going to bring everyone on because there's some people you can't convince, but there's people in the middle that I feel like I can try to move them. But I like taking an issue and trying to get to the empirical nature of that will speak to the most people. Like when I'm working on a script, I'm often trying to like, okay, here's the idea I want to convey, but how can I reach the most people to engage with this idea? So on the one hand, people that kind of poo-poo mass culture, like to me, it's exciting. Like you're almost like, can you tap into the chord of humanity on that issue or with that song or with that art piece? But I think back to the numbers thing, unfortunately, I mean, I'm sure you feel this way too, as a working artist, I'm always somewhat worrying about like, how is my next thing going to get funded, or fundraising, and those things matter. Like your view counts, your listen counts when you're fundraising for the next project. It is, and I am a working artist. I have to usually say, oh, and my last film did this and it reached this many people. That's why I'd like to raise this amount of money so I can reach, it's all like quantitative, which is unfortunate, but it's not like we live in a country that gives grants to artists to just.
Well, going, if you think about creativity in general, I think we were starting this idea of talking about about how everyone's creative, or how we've given our creativity away to quote unquote professionals, that we pay them to be creative so that we can enjoy it. And that robs people of this inherent right, or even it starts to tell a story that this label that you're not creative, but that really takes away even your agency of thinking about the base level creativity that just our thoughts are, everything that we do, like that we are at our core creative beings. That's what it means to be human, like this element of choice and nonstop creation. We are just the universe creating. And sometimes that flourishes in forms that are just more fantastic, like a film or a painting or a dance or a song, but it also just like our entire life. And so when we get into this world where everything's quantified, like this is better because it's bigger, you really start to believe that it's like, well, I'm not creative because I'm not even in that. I could never compete. And it's a competition, right? And it's just a strange thing. It's a distraction, I think, because really we're all doing it all the time, but we've totally forgotten.
I'm so glad you brought it back to this part of this, what we originally wanted to talk about. We got into commerce and numbers, but they're related. I'll tell you, I think this goes back to a lot of that we spend so much time online, which is so much about receiving, reacting to other people's everything. And that I generally don't think we give enough space to let that creativity really do its thing, which is, what I've been focused about in my work, is that, like, I recently started, I journal every morning. Do you journal? Did we talk about that before?
I used to journal, but that was a long time ago. I don't journal so much anymore.
I'm sending you something.
But I'm a big believer in free writing. I'm a big believer in writing in general as just a method of getting in touch with your unconscious too.
Exactly. So I'm a big journaler. My husband would call me an extreme journaler because I journal 3 hours on.
That reminds me of like extreme sports.
Exactly.
Like you journal while upside down.
I'm an extreme journaler because I have all these different pads for different things. Like I have a daily one, the 5-minute journal, which I would love to send to you because it has really been life-changing. Are you still there? Because you're frozen. Okay.
Yeah. And your collar is what it's rubbing on.
Okay, I'm holding it again. Okay.
Just 1 little inch is enough.
Okay. Yeah. So the 5-minute journal I do in the morning and the evening, it's like 3 things you're grateful for, things that would make today great, morning and end, like just redirecting your brain a little bit. But lately I've been going back to something that I try to do. It's really called Morning Pages by this writer, Julia Cameron.
Yeah. But super famous back in the day.
About really just writing for 3 pages, whatever. And I'm a big dreamer. And whenever I get into that mode of doing that, of just freehand writing first thing in the morning, I am blown away what comes out, like an idea, a thought, or something. Just like, it's very fun to just let my mind unwind. And whenever I do that, it just reminds me, and of course on my tech Shabbats, when I have no screens for a full day, it happens a lot where just ideas just come out of me. And I feel like we are living in a world where we're constantly optimizing every moment, whether it's listening to a podcast, making a call, doing a text, being online, that we don't give ourselves those pockets of space to let the creativity kind of suds up, if you will.
Yeah, it is a kind of balance. We most definitely, I mean, I'm assuming other people are like this, where so many moments of your day are filled with content or information. Like you said, podcasts or multitasking or even like music, or I really try to hang on to any moment that's it's definitely one thing,
Yeah, that's good.
or
That's
even
good.
nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
No thing is happening, but it's quite rare. And I am very concerned, to be honest, about even just myself. I'm like, what happened? Like, how is it that before the iPhone, essentially, like I read more
It was the iPhone.
and
Yeah.
it did something to me, and it's transformed my entire life. And it's like, but at the same time, it's like there absolutely was a massive amount of my life where I didn't have this thing, and
Hmm.
like, and I can't even like remember. I'm like, what was that like?
That's why, I mean, I'm such an advocate for people to try to unplug one day a week, because when you remember, it's like I return to my old self on that analog
Mm-hmm.
day. I get one analog
Yeah.
day a week. I listen to vinyl, we use a Polaroid, I read books, I do nothing, I hang out. And I like that part of myself of just the do nothing, or really present, and not feeling like I'm missing something, or I need to respond to something, or I need to look something up, or
Yeah.
I'm just there. And even for my kids who are 13 and 19 now, I want them to know what that brain feels like, because which they do every week, because it's a valuable mode. And I think you know the best aspects of life for me about these different modes of being, like modes when you're connecting with someone, modes when you're connecting to yourself, modes when you're in nature, modes when you're listening to music, or in one of your experiences, like, and just to make sure that the phone and the internet doesn't make it so it all becomes one thing you're jacked into all the time, even those different things that are happening on there, that you like putting your brain into different modes is really important. I think that's why like intensive weekend retreats are amazing, or going
Mm-hmm.
camping or a hike, or you're just like forcing yourself into this different mode. And since we're talking about creativity, like I really do look at the times when I feel creative. Like I want to protect those times because they're so valuable to me, and you have to
Yeah.
fight for them. Like really
Yeah.
actually create, you have to have the courage to actually turn off your phone or put it in a drawer and be like, I'm just going to be and see what
Yeah.
happens. And it might be uncomfortable a little bit because you're so used to touching that phone and looking something up on that, but once you get past that, you're like, I have everything I need right here. And there's a lot of things I'm not hearing because I'm filling up the void with everything.
My mornings are that like special creative time, and I do have to fight to like keep them not other things intruding into it. And it's my favorite thing. I've been back for like a week from a lot of touring, and I've needed to get into this new record, but that's a creative space. And instead of it being like a chore, I wake up in the morning and like, what excites me the most? That I like,
Mm,
what thing do? And I'm like, it's recording that vocal thing, or it's like
mm,
doing that piano thing again. It's like, yeah, but I'm really supposed to do blank. It's like, do the thing that you're really excited
I love
about.
that. Yeah.
That's really fun. And I think if people were to think about like doing creative acts that way, it could even be like baking cookies. And it's like, I don't know, throw something weird on, or like make them in a way, just be playful with it. And
Hmm.
you have to find the thing that's a little bit fun or exciting. It's like, I want to do that thing,
Hmm.
as opposed to it's like zazen, or it's like, it's going to be a chore. Not that there isn't value in that too.
Yeah, and I think actually the creative process, like when I'm now going into the Ferry Building twice a week, which I had to really carve out time from my films and my lecturing work, and the things that I make money at, to like carve out the studio time. So I take the ferry in, which is super fun. Like just I
Nice.
feel like it's like a
Yeah, it is
mental
fun. Yeah.
facial, like a creative facial. I'm like my brain, I'm like on a boat. I take it to the ferry building, which is just delightful. And then I go to this very inspiring space. And the first thing I do on a notepad is I'm like I know there's some logistical things. I'm having a show in October. There's a lot of stuff to make that happen. I've never even had an
Sure.
exhibit of an art show, so I'm figuring that out. But then I'll do what you just said, which is like, what is the creative thing I want to make sure I do today? And yesterday it was like painting gold on this piece of wood for this piece that I'm doing, and it didn't really turn out okay, but it was fine because I was excited to try it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this goes back to, I'm a big believer in a pad of paper and a Sharpie pen, and each day, like, what do you hope to get out of this day? And
Mm-hmm.
let there be one thing you're super excited about, and because you're going to have to do a lot of, the grunt work of just being an artist and getting your stuff out there and raising the money. And there's all of that. But what's the thing that's going to, like you said, get you excited? And, I was at, I spoke at my high school last week, which was a whole other thing because high school were not the best years of my life. Let's just put it that way. And there was a kid that raised his hand. He goes, well, how do you figure out what you want to do in life? And I remember that feeling, like, you just know he's like, 15-year-old old or something. And I was like, try to find out as many things you can do that make you feel alive. Like, take tons of elective, take tons of crazy classes to make you feel alive. And I think that's what you're also talking about, is the thing you're excited about that makes you feel alive, that makes you feel heightened in some way.
And in many ways, what I'm saying is that, like, expressing that creativity in you is being alive.
Yes.
Like, without doing it, you're actually not fully. Some people have never really even gone there. The more it's taken out of schools and stuff, and it's like they're just like they don't even know the pleasure that can come from creating anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think creativity. I mean, cooking, gardening. There's so many elements of creativity. I mean, mathematics can be creative. I think it's actually a framing of, like, looking at living passionately, or like thinking in new ways is creativity, or approaching life with passion, and I do think, like, the way you live your life can be very creative. What you read, the way you dress. I mean, I love fashion, as you can see. I'm like, oh, what am I going to wear for this? I'm going to wear this shirt that I think he's going to love. Because it's like, I'm a canvas and my hat's part of the canvas, my lipstick, and then whatever.
Mushrooms on the shirt.
Mushrooms were for you. But I think you can be an artist in the way you live. And I certainly know people that don't have, like, an official artistic work that they do, but they are an artist in the way they live, and I think that's interesting too.
So can you tell me a little bit more about this piece you're going to do in Rio that you did once? Is it like theatrical or what is it?
I call it, okay, I didn't know what to call it, and then I finally came upon spoken cinema. So for years I've been making movies, and there's a lot of animations and visuals and, like, surreal stuff, and I'm trying to visualize ideas. So somebody once called my films, like, cinematic essays. I think that's a good description. So, and then I've given talks for 30 years as well. And as I've gotten into both of those, I've started to merge them. And, like, behind me is a very cinematic experience when I'm speaking now. So then I wanted to add an element of a live score, which would be so much fun to talk to you about. So, because you are actually doing, like, composing, but I had my producer, we picked all of these different tracks. So, like, 25 tracks. And he was live mixing to my live. It's like I was doing a live movie. I'm on stage. I usually narrate my movies anyways. And I have all these clips from all my movies that I'm recombining in a new way. And I had new ones. And then I'm doing a lot of audience interaction. So it really was like a one-woman show. I called it spoken cinema, but it was a very immersive experience. I mean, I want to go to your show and you should come to mine, because I think we would be inspired by each other's, what we're guiding people through. And it was called Dear Human, which it looked a lot at the relationship between technology and humanity. And it was an hour. And it was, it was something I had always wanted to do. I actually, even like 15 years ago, I had been commissioned for this art center, Yerba Buena Art Center, to do it there. At the time, I was calling it a live documentary. And then my dad got sick and I pulled out at the last minute. I've never really pulled out of something. So it's something I've always wanted to do, but it all came together right before the pandemic. And I got this peak experience in my career. And I thought we were going to take it on tour. That was the plan. And then the pandemic happened. So.
And so you're remounting it. When you're remounting after all that time, that pandemic time that passed, is it you reworking it? Do you have new eyes on it after the pandemic?
Yeah, there'll be a new
the same
ending that'll incorporate the pandemic, but I'm not going to actually have my full team. I mean, it's going to be a version of the Dear Human at MoMA because I'm going to be in Brazil and I don't have the budget to but I'll definitely rework where I land, because I learned there was so many lessons from the pandemic that I hope we all remember, because I think as hard as it was and so many lives were lost, um, I also feel like a gift of asking the really big questions in people's lives. What am I doing? Who am I with? Where do I live? What matters? And that just felt like a huge philosophical space to ask some big questions that I hope we're going to bring forward. So what do you think?
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit like
I know.
look, I know on a personal level it was seismic. Like that's very true.
Personally,
I've
I
never
know.
seen. I mean, none of us have ever seen anything like that. As a global happening, nothing's ever been quite like that. That affected everyone. I mean, technically still happening. I
Yeah.
think culturally, people feel like it's over, but it's very much not over. And we actually don't. This thing could take a lot of turns that, sadly, I really, really hope it doesn't. But
Yeah.
it is not done with its disruption and destruction. I mean, as we're speaking right now, technically, we're in the sixth wave in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's just no one seems to know or care,
Well, it's
except
so
for the
weird.
people who are
I
really
mean,
sick.
that's what's so fascinating. There's a great op-ed video today, which I'll send you, called "Why We Need Endings" or something like that. Going back to the
Mm,
beginning of our conversation, that
fascinating. Yeah.
it has a montage of all these end sequence of movies, because there's, I think it's all hitting us. There's no ending to this pandemic. Like, we
That's
all,
crushing to even. I mean, I know there's a truth to that, and we were actually told that at the very beginning, but everyone's like, "I will not. I can't hear that. I
right. But
can't."
don't you
That's
feel like there's some level right now? Like, every couple weeks, I feel like we're in this new era. And I was like, we're in a new stage now, because like people aren't testing as much. It's just kind of out there. I don't know.
it's
Like,
just always happening now. It's just like
everyone
this
you hear,
always
I mean, I
going
haven't
on.
gotten it yet. Have you gotten it?
I pause because like I don't like to jinx
Okay.
things, but I haven't had any symptoms. I've never tested positive. I
Yeah.
think I've had it,
That's what I
but I
think too.
can't tell. But
I'm
I
exactly where
can't
you
tell
are.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had any symptoms or a positive
I mean,
test,
I know
and I'd love to keep it
I don't
that
want to
way.
jinx anything either, but it's weird to be one of the only, because now almost everyone in my life has had it now. And
Yeah, me too.
that even feels more like it's inevitable. And I do think I got it at some point, and maybe like my daughter had no symptoms. Had we not tested her, we wouldn't have known.
Yeah, and I live part of the time with a teenager who could give two fucks, when
Yeah.
the pandemic was going on. It's just like there was a big hole in our boat of, isolation. It's like I was doing my best, but I feel like it definitely came through. And so anyway, you're right. It's will probably continue to like be this background noise that touches people. And I hope it stays background as opposed to like some new thing,
Right, that we
strain or
don't
whatever.
even know
That's like,
about.
oh, this is worse than anything. But uh, it's, but at the same time, it's just a strange dichotomy
We're in
of
a
like
strange space right now. Yeah.
yeah, on a personal level, people have been really shaken and changed, but then it's just on a societal level, we haven't changed that much.
Okay, I would agree with you at one point. Like, of course, in the last month between Roe v. Wade and NRA, like, I'm like, are we? Those are two issues that I feel like we are going so backwards, and I don't think we're going to go forward. That is where I get, you know, I was talking to he's become a friend, him and Steven Pinker, who's one of my favorite writers.
Mm,
And I was talking to him about this very issue, and he goes, Tiffany, this is just the United States. There was 4 countries in the last month that legalized abortion. Realize how this is a united. And it was good to hear that again, although I know that on some level. Um,
yeah.
but wait, the one area, at least in the arts, I don't know if you found this, but the social justice, like, George Floyd and the real awakening and people being present to really seeing the racial disparity, at least in the arts, I'm going to say that almost every hire I have seen in the last year and a half has been a person of color. And I really have seen that. And that has
Yeah.
felt real. Um, I have seen progress there. I really have. I mean, it's not
Yes.
in every aspect of society, but in the arts and in magazines. And I just feel like it feels like there was some progress there, so much more to do. But um, I felt like that. I mean, and then, with the shooting and Roe v. Wade, my heart is so heavy on what progress is going to look like here in this country. And I don't think there's going to be any movement in the Republican Party, which is
whatever that is right now.
whatever even that means. Exactly. Even that
I
word.
want to say that these are the last gasps of something dying.
Yeah.
And, it goes through these sort of gyrations and fighting in a way that gets almost worse as it gets closer to some kind of systemic change. But a part of me is not so sure.
That's where I've
But
kind of been. I used to always feel
yeah,
it was
but I
this
want
last
to feel
gasp of
that.
like patriarchy and fear of, you know,
It what kind of is though. I mean, just let's talk about politically. Like, it is sort of a minority rule, and supposedly, we are a slightly progressive, liberal-leaning country as a people. Yet there's a party that's like can't that they're a dying party if they don't change, and so instead they're doing all this crazy shit to hold on to
I mean,
power in a
literally
way.
a dying party when they're not getting vaccinated or wearing masks. Like the most deaths have been in the
It's
red states. I mean, that's where I'm just like, how how is this gonna continue to play out?
well, and that's why so in some ways, things do get crazier and crazier as a way to hold on,
Mhm,
quite literally. And
mhm,
so you have to use some pretty crazy tactics to still have any sort of power when you're actually in a minority. And so in that sense, we are going through big change it's through a form of collapse.
mhm,
Like we have to burn the fields. Things have to be replaced. We can't keep doing certain things in the same way. So those things are just now becoming so unsustainable that eventually they just won't work.
mhm,
Whether it's oil, or or systemic racism, it just keeps getting like more and more friction
mhm.
against this tidal wave
Well
of change.
well, the other big change I was gonna say, in addition to in the arts really seeing it feel more representative, is in the workplace. So one of the things my
Mm,
film studio does, like, is we do this, I do a lot of talks, and one of the one that's been getting booked a lot is the future of work and well-being, because a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm not commuting 5 days a week and having my life center around work." For 2 years during the pandemic, my life centered around my life again. And
right.
and so I'm seeing a major transformation in the workplace. So we give a talk that kind of goes into the neuroscience of unplugging and creating more balance and boundaries around work and your life. And I do think like we're not going to go back to that 5 days a week commute, because employees they won't do it because they've seen that life. I mean, you and I are both in, we probably make our own schedule more. I always have, but there's a lot of people that were living under
Oof.
a unsustainable burnout reality of, commuting long hours and working far away from their life and not being able to be there in important moments for their kids, whatever it was. And as a working woman, that's always how I structured my film studio, because I ran the film studio. So we only went in 2 days a week for 16 years. And now that's becoming like, people are like, maybe we just go in 2 days a week. And I'm like, yeah, that works a lot better for someone's life. So that's a real transformation. There's one talk I give called The Silver Linings of the Pandemic, and I try to hang on. So I mentioned to you the workplace transformation. That is real, because I try to hold on to the good. Just, the other one is the watching scientists all collaborate for a vaccine. I mean, that was
Mm,
somebody that's a big proponent of the web early on. Watching how the web allowed collaboration was very exciting. Not that it happened with every country, but a lot of countries shared information, and we got a vaccine so quickly because there was a lot of scientific sharing. Um, Teletherapy, telehealth, which always should have been there, is now finally really here. Outdoor dining, at least where I live in the Bay Area, no one had. We always wanted outdoor dining, like, and now we finally have it. Anyways, I have like a list of 8 things, but
yeah.
because as frustrated I am with the news, I'm always like, okay, we did make some progress on these areas that I hope will stay as we move forward. Because if you look at the news, which is just, it's crushing. It's crushing.
Yeah, it's that old information sickness. Um, this economy of scale, the way that translates into our world is also like the growth economy. The idea that we have to keep growing
Growing.
our economies meaning you have to have more consumption, literally,
Yeah.
and you have to have more
Feed the
things that you can.
beast. Feed the beast.
You have to have things you can turn into things to consume, and we're running out of things to do that with.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to have these intangible things like time or water, which is tangible. But I mean, we start to just what can we make more commodities out of? And I think if people in themselves try to break free of that mindset in their own lives, it's like I don't always have to be growing in a sort of like external way. It's more
Mm-hmm.
about the internal growth, because we do always feel like I have to be climbing, I have to be getting richer, I have to be everything has to be
Mm-hmm.
bigger, 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 and it's a never-ending story.
I love the way you frame that about the external growth and like the inner growth is really, I think that's what journaling does to me. The journaling, it's like, I am going to be an explorer of my own mind and my own creativity. And I'm going to turn off the influences of the outside world and see what's inside of me, which I find very interesting. And I think people need to get comfortable with being alone. Like, that's the other thing. The phone is you never have to be alone. And actually,
Mm.
every great wisdom practice in every culture talks about the value of reflection and silence and being still. So I think that, cultivating that part of yourself. And I think that's what my tech Shabbats, I find the other 6 days when I'm online, I'm like hungry. I'm hungry. I can't be satiated. I want more news. I want more email. I want more notifications. I want more images. I want more, more, more. And I turn it all off and I'm suddenly grateful with what I already have. And I don't feel that need to consume and need more things or places I'm not at, and I suddenly get into this state of presence. And then the journaling, and that kind of feels like it opens up that world, that other world to me, which is like subconscious, unconscious, my thoughts, my concerns, a lot of self-therapy. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Do you think it could be done in the same way through other creative
Oh
expressions,
yeah,
like singing a song or
music. Yeah,
painting or
yeah. I think
these sorts of things?
I think everyone has their own. Everyone's unique. Everyone has their own things that bring that out. You know, Doing art also these days has really been that space for me, playing music. Yeah, I think that's kind of going back to finding the things that put you in a flow state, finding the things that make you feel alive, that make you feel present, where you
Mm-hmm.
don't need external things. I think that's another thing that we're talking about, is like where what you're doing and what you're creating is enough and is exciting, and is exciting as going on an adventure on a like that's the way I feel like I'm going on an adventure in my own creativity when I have the courage to create that space. Like my new morning journal again, I'm like, oh, I got to do this every day. Like when I don't do it, it's a
Yeah.
bummer.
Yeah. But do you think though that there's something unique though about writing in itself, like that's
Mm.
different or special, or that's something that like why don't you just go into the studio and start working on your art and say, well, I don't need to write today because I'm going to do this thing, and
Mm.
that's an expression. Like, what's the
That's
special
good.
value of the
Yeah.
writing?
I think I write to kind of know what I'm thinking, which I think Joan Didion first said. But when I read that recently, I'm like, yeah, like it's almost like I'm an explorer of what I'm thinking, what am I worried about, what am I hoping for. So that's like my ground level to set myself up to create a great, have a great session in filmmaking or art making. Yeah, I guess. And everyone probably has a different, like, playing music. I was talking to a musician and he was just so at one with his instrument. I was watching him play and complimented him afterwards. And you could just tell he was so at one with this instrument and how powerful that was. And maybe I feel very at one when I connect my pen to my notepad, not the computer. It's a very different kind of writing. I
Mm.
feel like things kind of tumble out of me in a different way. And there is a lot of research that writing in a journal on paper, like your mind works differently when you're like writing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cognitive behavioral therapy, I think,
yeah,
that's an important part of like creating those neural pathways, is writing it down,
yeah.
like actually writing it down. And maybe it's the speed of it,
Mm.
or there's almost maybe it's something about actually like tracing characters.
Mm. Well, do you feel
Who
that way when
knows?
you're doing music? Like, tell me what that feels like. I mean, do you,
Well, for me, there's nothing more special than an improvisational space. Like I get a
Mhm.
lot of joy out of like mixing or performing is fun. I mean, all that stuff's awesome, but there's nothing quite like when you're allowing creation in the moment through
Mm,
improvising. And
mm,
then it's really nothing more special than doing that with another person, which I do quite not regularly because I'm largely a solo artist, and I miss that.
hmm
I mean, it's so magical when both of you are doing it together or a group of people and you're creating this group thing through nothing.
Ah,
And it's
that sounds
it's
amazing.
music, and then
Ah,
it's
it
like
sounds
it's in time, and
amazing.
you're responding, and it's fun,
And
and
you can
it's
tell,
also
like, as
something.
an audience member, when that
Oh,
magic happens. Like,
whew.
did you watch the Beatles documentary?
I didn't. I would love to, but
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't
So it came out like
recently.
four
Yeah,
months
yeah.
ago. And like a lot of people said, oh my God, so many parts of this are so boring because you're literally, they have a show.
I'd love it though.
Oh,
Yeah,
you would love it because my
yeah.
favorite moments were them just like, they were like playing, they're sitting there and they have all this pressure to do a new album. And the way they're like, Yoko Ono's sitting there, they're all kind of playing music they loved as a kid. And then sometimes they're playing their favorite songs that they've done. And then all of a sudden you feel it kind of like something kind of, and then it's like one of the songs that's like one of the most famous Beatles songs, just like kind of bubble out of the four of them. And you're watching it happen. I think you would just absolutely love it for those moments.
Yeah.
And I think, it's interesting. I took up the ukulele like 4 years ago and I played with this great teacher. And then she moved away during the pandemic. So we play on Zoom. And I realized that my next step is I want to play with other people. Like I've been just playing by myself for years now. I play with her sometimes. It's so hard over Zoom. So I'm going to try to find a band to jam with my ukulele.
Yeah, maybe your family even. I mean, there's
Yeah.
that old book, The Good Life, that was from the 30s, and it's
Oh, I don't know it.
post-depression. Yeah, it was a classic about a couple who lost everything in the depression, and they went up to Vermont and just built their own house out of stone, and they had all these new rules about no debt and how to live the good life. And part of it was they did music together on, I think, at
Mm,
least once a week, and that was a part of like we have to have this. They didn't consider themselves, like musicians, but they all were like
yeah.
would sing songs, and that's also something we did as people forever
Yeah.
until recorded music because it was the only way,
Right.
and that's another thing we've taken away from our own lives. It's like, yeah, everybody sings.
Yeah.
That's a human thing. Like whether you think it's pretty or not, I mean, everyone can sing.
Well, I think that okay, this is a good part of the creative part because there's creativity. I mean, you and I also make our living that way, so there's kind of let's talk about that. But then there's creativity going back to just for the process of creating, and it's not for anybody. And I think that's really important eh, for anybody. That it's about creating for creating's sake, singing a song for singing a song, playing the ukulele.
It's
That
for the muse.
it's
Yeah,
for
like
whatever,
yeah.
and giving it like knowing how beautiful that is. And again, I think that's about making space to get into it, and give yourself time to. I think learning new things is a great thing to do for the rest of your life. Like I'm a lifelong learner. I mean, even this artwork I'm doing in this new art show, and I love the beginner's mind of like, how do I figure this out? And I'm looking at the NFTs. Maybe I'm gonna do an NFT. It's very exciting to me because it's all new and different than the film world, but kind of adjacent. And some things are similar, some are very different. And um, I think in general, a good philosophy to live is to, anyone listening right now, if you took out a piece of paper and a pen, I'm a big fan of that, and wrote the things that you enjoy doing. And then what are the things you would love to learn how to do? You are never too old.
Mm,
Never too old because it's gonna anything. Is it painting? Is it learning a language? Is it playing music? Is it because those things will bring you such joy, and even in the act of learning and just for yourself. And
yeah.
there's, so many opportunities to do that online now too. Although I'm never very good at like, I've signed up for a couple online classes and I never make the time to do them. I actually think taking them in like now that things are opening up again, like take the painting class, take the music class, like go with other people and like do something you've always wanted to do. It's such a great way to exercise your creativity.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that's inspirational to people who maybe feel stuck, but there's always a sense of resistance against it too. Like, I don't know about you, but as much as I enjoy it, as much as I'm sitting here extolling all the benefits, I also resist it every single day, which is a strange thing. Uh, and
Tell
I
me
put
more about that you resist it. Like, how would you define that?
uh, it just
Just that it's
it's
hard
like
to
that.
start? Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's just there's always things that I'm like, well, I'm gonna resist. I procrastinate dropping in. As soon as I drop in, it's everything's
I
great, but I
like that
really
word
resist
drop in
dropping
for that.
in.
Well, I found like I didn't realize how much I needed to go to a different space. Like that, I was been working at home for 2 years. I used to have a film studio, got rid of that at the pandemic, but going into this studio space where like I have to make a journey to get there,
Yeah, that
it
helps. Yeah.
helps, man. I just find like it sets me up better than
I just walk about 30 feet from the house into the studio. And so there's lots of things that could stop me from getting that 30 feet. Lots of things.
I hear that.
But I do it. I'm very proud. So, if anything, actually, what I'm proud of is my will. And and everything else that comes through, I don't know what the hell all that stuff is. So my will is what helps me build technique or show up and sit down in the chair, sit down at the piano and just start creating.
How many do you have
And
like a schedule? Like do you go, I am gonna sit there from like
no, it's
no.
loose. It's just I like the mornings is my
Me
favorite
too,
time
yeah.
for creation. So I try not to book things in the morning because then I'm like, oh, I don't really have time now.
I'm totally like that too. Like I just started taking an earlier ferry because I was getting there too late. I'm like, wait, I'm not using up my most creative brain. I need to get there
Exactly, you
early.
lose the juice. Yeah, I know. And
After
sometimes I
lunch,
think
I'm
like I'll
done.
do it later, and
Yeah.
then it's not really as interesting, or I'm burnt out. So like there's always exceptions to the rule, but yeah, I find that I like to hack away regularly at it, but in small amounts, like
Yeah.
a couple hours versus like it's gonna be an 8 hour day of like it can do that, but you burn out, you
But don't
know?
you feel so good like if you've done something creative in the morning, you're like, oh, okay.
Oh my God. No,
Feels
the
so good.
whole
The whole
day
day you're
has
like
meaning. It has meaning.
it's reading.
And everything else is just gravy.
Yeah.
And conversely, if I don't do that, there's this monkey on my back,
Yeah.
and it's like, you haven't really done that thing, but now are you going to do it later? I don't. Are you going to? Are you going to? And then it just
Well,
slips
what's
away.
interesting because Wednesdays I've really started to devote as like my admin day.
Yeah,
That
that's
I'm
smart.
not like I'm just taking care of, the running of a household and I just put everything to that day. I'm like, I find I'm good if I like, and again, I'm separating my art time at the studio. But sometimes if I feel creative, like last Saturday, I still have a little studio at home. And last Saturday on my tech Shabbat, I was like, I'm going to create some new sculptures. And it was so fun because it was like added. But I find what's been
Yeah,
really helpful is to kind of segment, just like my tech Shabbats. Those are my analog days, my analog thinking. Like I save things to think about and write about for Saturday. So I found as I get older, the rituals around things are more important. They give meaning, they give structure. Not that I always can do it, but they help.
no doubt. Well, I don't know. I feel like this is all really good info for people, but it's just interesting to see where you're at. Seems like you're in a very creative space, which is wonderful.
Oh, it's so fun. And
And
I listen, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm already thinking of what's going to be our part 3 conversation.
yeah,
I'm
no
excited for your
doubt.
movie. Okay. I can't wait to introduce you to Karen. And we're going to
Yes.
experience each other's shows live. That'll be very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will circle back to get some more advice from you
Of
on the
course.
documentary.
Happy to help.
But yeah, it's underway, and we got more to do, of course. But it's interesting. Like sometimes with songs, I don't like having like a plan. I want to see what comes out, and
Yeah.
it starts to form in
Yeah.
pieces. Like maybe it's just a piano, and then you're like, maybe I'll put a vocal in this. And they're going, gosh, I need to record drums and bass.
Yeah.
And now it's next thing you know, it's like got an orchestra, and like I didn't conceive of this. It happened,
Yeah.
and I want to make the documentary the same way. But films are a little more challenging because it's so collaborative. And you have to plan so much that it's a real luxury to have it just unfold like that. But at the same time, I want to be in service to that.
Yeah, you can create
You know?
space for that, but the structure is good that she'll teach you about. I found it really helpful. Like with anything, once you know the structure, you know what you can play within.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm super excited about that, and such a pleasure to talk to you. A gift,
Yes.
and thank you. And I was really looking forward to it. And it was all that I hoped for. We went to a lot of different places.
Yeah, well, keep creating, and
You
look
too.
forward to talking again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for coming back on the show. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Soulmate, but it's the instrumental version, which is part of the Still Possible album that just came out on June 17th, a couple days back here. Happy solstice, by the way. It's kind of a solstice release. It's all B-sides from my Possible album. And this track, some of the instrumentals are like bonus tracks that I put on there. But if you go to the Bandcamp, it's only actually available if you're into downloading high-resolution albums, which, hey, I'm all for that. I love an album experience. I also love high-fidelity music because maybe you think your ear doesn't really hear it, but your body does. You know, remember that music is a physical manifestation from a speaker or a voice or an instrument that hits your body with physical pressure waves, and the quality of those waves of the music matters in how it translates into the emotion of your body. So having higher resolution music, again, even if you don't think like you hear the difference, you emotionally respond more effectively to it. You have less ear fatigue. So give it a try sometime. You might find that you like it when you get the full bandwidth of what an artist has made with their music. But the non-instrumental version of this track, Soulmate, has Clinton Patterson playing the trumpet, which is fun. I hope you're enjoying that record. A lot of times you make an album and there's all these songs that they don't quite fit on the album flow, or for whatever reason they don't fit. And you're like, well, it's kind of silly. I don't want to not share them I want to have them be out there in the world. And it's just wonderful that I was finally able to find a way to do it. And I think this is pretty much it for the whole Possible album cycle. I'm deep into writing music for new records and new releases. So, as far as everything from the Possible world, thank you for supporting that album and this release. It's this whole constellation of releases. I hope you guys have a beautiful solstice, and I hope you are having a great summer. I know it's getting weirder and harder and crazier, but we've been saying that all along, haven't we? And that's really what this work is all about, is our internal fortitude and clarity about what our true north is and what stars, are important to us, so that we can walk through the fire with as much grace for ourselves. And by doing that, we're giving that out into the world by bringing presence and groundedness when we can. Sometimes we need to lean on someone else, and sometimes someone leans on you. But until we meet again, my dear friends, keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do, do it with grace.